my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I am your co-host. Today I'm super excited to have my friend and long-term colleague, Dr. Laura Brayton, as our guest. Hey, Dr. Laura, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's great. I love doing this podcast, and I love even more when I personally know the person that I'm speaking to and interviewing. So I'm really happy about today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. So let me do Laura's pretty incredible bio, and then we'll get started. Dr. Laura Brayton is a holistic chiropractor, author, and speaker passionate about supporting the health and wellness of families. Dr. Brayton writes regularly on health-related topics and is a lecturer for various holistic groups, including yoga studios, childbirth education centers, and new moms groups. She also continues to stay up-to-date and current in her field with frequent postgraduate seminars in functional medicine, nutrition, allergy elimination, pediatrics, and maternity. In addition, Dr. Brayton has received certifications in Chiropractic Pediatrics, Webster Technique for breech presentations, Sacro-Occipital Technique, or S.O.T, and is an advanced level practitioner of Nambudripad's, yes, I nailed it, Allergy Elimination Technique, NEAT. Dr. Brayton is a BioEnergetic Practitioner utilizing Applied Kinesiology to eavesdrop into the body and determine its current needs for health. She is an active member of the Association of New Jersey Chiropractors, American Chiropractic Association, Hoboken Chamber of Commerce, and past president of the Hoboken Rotary Club. She also raised over $3,000 for Team for Kids, which is a charity focused on addressing child obesity by running the 2010 New York City Marathon. Dr. Brayton was chosen by New Jersey Family Magazine as New Jersey's favorite kid docs in 2010 through 2016. On Labor Day 2014, she birthed a podcast called Well-Adjusted Mama to educate and to empower women's preconception to early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. In November 2014, she spent a month in Bali writing her first book on the topic of birth and is excitedly awaiting its publication. For more information, please check out our websites at www.drlaurabrayton.com and www.BraytonBirthMethod.com. Wow, that's a heck of a bio. Woo! Where do we start from there? Okay, you know what? This is what we're going to do. Every interview we do, we start basically the same question. How about everybody loves a good story. How about your backstory? How did you end up being who you are today? Give the audience a little feel of who you are.
Yeah, I would love that. So, I definitely know that I was born to be a chiropractor. I had that clarity since I was a very little girl. And, I really, credit my father who was not a chiropractor, but he was an engineer. And his first experience with chiropractic was, out of engineering school. His first job was with General Electric, and he moved from New Hampshire to Davenport, Iowa to start his career. And so he was, in his early 20s, living in a new state and city, not knowing anyone. And he lived in an apartment building that was loaded with Palmer chiropractic students because Palmer is located in Davenport, and that is the fountainhead or the first chiropractic school. And so, those were his colleagues, essentially people that they were around the same age. He was making friends with these people. And, as the story goes, he was invited to a party at one of the chiropractic students' apartments, and chiropractic students love practicing on fresh bodies. So essentially that was his first adjustment, was at a party, and he was like, it just clicked. He was like, this makes so much sense. Structure equals function. It was very logical to him as an engineer, and he was under chiropractic care for the rest of his life. He was just a huge advocate for the profession. He loved everything that it represented. So once he met my mom, they got married, and she was pregnant with me as her first baby. She started to experience lower back pain and had never been to a chiropractor. And my dad said, well, you should go see my chiropractor. And they were living in North Carolina. And so my mom did. She, experienced relief from her pregnancy-related lower back pain. And then after giving birth, the chiropractor educated my mom on bringing in the baby to get checked So I literally have been under care my entire life because luckily to that education from my dad and then through the chiropractor that my mom was seeing. So my sister and I are very grateful that we've been under care our entire lives. And I knew since I was very little that this is the path that I was meant to be on.
Well, that's great. As long as I've known you, I've never heard that story before. That's pretty cool. That's great.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
And why did you decide what chiropractic school to go to, or when did you know you were going to be a chiropractor? I knew when I was 12 years old. I mean,
I knew so I got you beat there. I knew when I was about 5.
There you go.
That I wanted to be a chiropractor. And once again, my dad was a big influence in my life. And it's funny, actually, speaking to some chiropractors, they're kind of shocked that no one else in my family is a chiropractor because, as chiropractors know, a lot of times it's kind of like in the family, right? Mm-hmm. But in a lot of ways, my dad was like a chiropractor. He didn't actually go to school. He didn't become a chiropractor, but he just really resonated with the profession and was a huge advocate, referred so many people to the chiropractors that he would see over the years, depending on where we lived. And like my entire family was under care because of him. So that was kind of my path. And it was interesting. When I was in college, I went to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, go Heels. And
they're still in a tournament, right? They're still alive,
they are. And Duke lost, so I'm very excited about that. I love my Tar Heels. And when I was in school there, I was a bio major. And there were a lot of pre-med students. Anybody that knows of UNC, they're really known for their medical school, and it's very competitive. And it was a very competitive climate to be in these biology classes with these students. And, I'm like, well, I'm not pre-med, I'm pre-chiro, It was like I was the weirdo in the class for sure. And I'll never forget, I talked to my advisor and I was like, I'm planning on going to chiropractic school. I didn't know at that time which one. And he was really like trying to talk me out of it. He was like, it's not a profession. Why would you want to do that? And he was trying to steer me towards med school. And I luckily was just so, strong in my philosophy, that I was like, I have no desire to go to a place where I'm just going to learn how to prescribe drugs. It was like, did not resonate with my upbringing. My upbringing was adjustments and organic food from our garden and natural remedies. And, when I got sick, I went to the chiropractor. When I fell off my bike, I went to the chiropractor. When I had my first fender bender at 16, I went to the chiropractor. Like that was what I was raised with. So by the time I was in college, it was like no one was convincing me otherwise. And then it was cool going through the process my senior year to determine which school I was going to go to. And, growing up in North Carolina, Life would have been one of the closer schools for me to go to down in Georgia. But my dad once again had a big influence, and he said, you know what, why don't we look at some other schools? And I went up to Illinois and looked at National, and then I went up to New York, all the way to upstate New York, and looked at New York Chiropractic College, and that's what I ultimately decided to go to school.
Cool. Now, so the other thing I didn't know is how well you were traveled throughout the United States. So how did you go from New York Chiropractic School to Hoboken, New Jersey, too? Because, I mean, you incredibly established yourself as such a powerful person in that community, and it's a great community, a great place to live, really close to New York City. How did you end up in Hoboken?
Great question. So, I am not from New Jersey, and never in a million years would thought that I would actually end up in New Jersey. But because I decided to go to New York Chiropractic College, I was upstate New York in Seneca Falls, which is where the campus is. But then I decided to do my internship in Levittown, which is in Long Island. And I did that because being, in my early 20s, I thought it would be exciting to live near New York City. And that was something I'd never lived near New York. So there was something that really attracted me to that lifestyle. But I didn't really love living in Long Island. So I did my 1 year, graduated, and and this is kind of a funny story, my chiropractic school boyfriend was from New Jersey. So I ended up finding a job in Bergen County as an associate right out of school. and moved to New Jersey because I wanted to live near him. And about 1 month after I moved to New Jersey, he dumped me. And then I was like, crap, I live in New Jersey and I don't know anybody here. And I just got dumped by my boyfriend. So it was quite an adjustment for me. But I was working at this office in Lodi, New Jersey. And luckily, I connected with a chiropractor in that town who lived in Hoboken, and she was maybe just a few years older than me. So we were both like in our 20s, and she's like, oh, why don't you come check, why don't you move to Hoboken? Like, even if you're going to work in Lodi, you can commute and live in Hoboken. And I had never heard of Hoboken, didn't know anything about it. But based on her suggestion, knowing that I was just like looking for like some social life, like I wanted to meet people and do something besides just go and work every day as a chiropractor in an office as an associate. So I will never forget one Saturday afternoon after I got out of the office, I drove to Hoboken and I parked and I just walked up and down Washington Street, which is the main drag, and I just loved it. I was like, it reminded me of Chapel Hill, where I went to college, and Franklin Street's the main street there, and it was just really vibrant and thriving and lots of great shops and restaurants, and it had that cool small town feel, but yet like New York City is literally right across the Hudson River. I just loved everything about that. So I decided there that I wanted to move to Hoboken. I found an apartment and then continued to commute to Lodi for another year, and then decided it was time to start my own practice, and I was going to start it in Hoboken, and that was in 2005.
That's great. I don't know if you feel this way, but when I started in Bayonne, I didn't know one person. In fact, I was never in Bayonne, and it seems like you were the same. And thinking back, that helped me because I had to find out who the people were to know. I didn't have any preconceived notions. I had to join all the clubs and I've done all the things and do all the things you did. And I'll tell you, it might seem hard, but when you don't know anybody, but it makes you find the people you need to know to build a practice.
There's no doubt. I didn't have any of those, like you said, connections of like family that lived nearby, because literally none of my family lives in New Jersey. I had lived in Hoboken for a few months prior to starting my practice, but I still didn't know a lot of people. So it was starting from scratch, and that's scary. But there was, this sense of adventure, and I have a strong work ethic, and I just, put my nose to the grindstone essentially and was like, who do I need to connect with? And also my practice is located in an office building that's not on the main drag, meaning it's not like a lot of pedestrians are walking by and seeing my sign. So I knew I needed to get out of the space and connect, and joining Rotary, that first year was hugely helpful, joining the Chamber of Commerce. So once again, connecting with other already established business owners in town, especially other holistic healthcare practitioners. And then eventually connecting with pediatricians and OBGYNs and just other types of, business owners in town that would make sense that, could, send referrals over and vice versa. So yeah, it was a lot. Those first few years was a lot of just putting myself out there and, scheduling lunch dates and stopping by offices, dropping off cards, really. And it's about connecting, right? You can drop off a business card, but if the person doesn't know you, they're not going to send people to you. You got to meet with them and connect with them at a personal level. So that's what I did those first few years to grow this practice. That was hugely important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's right. And you have such for people listening, Dr. Laura has such an incredible personality that she just draws you to her, and she's so vibrant, and everybody, when she's around people, everybody loves Dr. Laura, and that's what you need when for those who are entrepreneurs or young chiropractors or health practitioners, that's what you need, that passion and that fire to draw people to you, to share your message.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. And I want to start by just maybe a 20-second or 30-second piece here. We see our society getting sicker and sicker. We see things like autism, ADD, infections rising. Our whole society, I believe, is getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And the area that you specialize in, I believe, is where the rubber meets the road. And that's it starts with preconception coaching. If we want our society to be healthier, we need to start with the parents before they have children to get them as healthy as they can. So when they conceive and then when they birth and in the whole process, and I'm assuming that's what the Brayton birth method is, but
yes,
let's just, you could talk for as long as you want on this, but let's start with this idea of preconception coaching.
Oh, it's so hugely valuable. It is like the foundation of the Brayton birth method. It's like before you even get to the birth, you got to start with preconception work. And that's really for mom and dad.
Right.
I think there's also kind of a misconception that only women need to focus on fertility, and that certainly they are the vessel, carrying this baby and creating this baby, but genetics are coming from mom and dad. So there's 50% responsibility for dad to clean up his act as well prior to conception. So we do a lot of that work here in my office, and essentially kind of the philosophy that I've been taught from my mentors as a functional medicine practitioner is that a lot of these chronic diseases that you were mentioning are really coming from toxicities in our environment. And they're coming from multiple sources, but we do live in a very, very toxic environment, especially people living closer to the city, like our practices are right by New York City.
Right.
So our air, our water is polluted. Our foods are just not the same nutritional quality as they were, 40, 50 years ago. We have to be aware of genetically modified foods, which are not labeled. So we have to have, we really have to do our due diligence as consumers and be very educated about everything we purchase regarding food. We want to avoid packaged foods that are just full of chemicals. We want to be really aware of our skincare products that can also be totally loaded with chemicals that weren't even available, 10, 20, 30 years ago. There's just new chemicals being created every day and being put into our system, whether it's through food or something topically we put on our skin or something that we're breathing. So we just tend to be very toxic. And so we have to be smart about making really good choices about all of that, and especially if you're looking to start a family. And in addition to, and I recommend the Environmental Working Group website, ewg.org. They also have great apps that can really help you as a consumer make smart choices about what you buy, because that also really determines what products are available on the market. We can show our support for companies that are environmentally conscious and avoiding chemicals and other toxic ingredients. And that also goes for children's and babies products as well, which is very upsetting to me that, mainstream type products that you would see advertised on TV, marketed for children and babies, can actually still contain toxic ingredients that we want to avoid exposing our children to. But, so it's just important to be smart about that, right?
Yeah.
So we make smart choices about what we buy, food and skincare and whatnot, but we also still just have to detox. So even as a smart consumer doing the best that we can to stay clean, we're still going to be exposed to chemicals. We just can't avoid it completely. So that's where in my office, we do ideally a 6-month detox preconception, and that would be for mom and dad. And it really involves just cleaning out the liver, the kidneys, and the GI system, because those are our main pathways of detox and elimination in the body. And so there's a lot we can use naturally to clean out the person's system and support them, in addition to eating a healthy modified elimination diet that's organic and clean and doesn't contain antibiotics and hormones and pesticides and other types of, chemicals like that. So eating a clean diet alone, unfortunately, is really not enough from what I find to detox our bodies. Unfortunately, it should be, but it's not. And that's where bringing in some, functional medicine type products. In my office, I work with some companies that make, functional, food that's like a high quality vegan protein that has other ingredients that are super powerful and antioxidants to help detox the body. And then in certain circumstances, I also might bring in some homeopathics. as well as herbal remedies. And so kind of bringing them all together on an individual basis, depending on what that patient's body's needs, to help clean their system out. And it also is really important for regulating hormones. And also what we find is the pollution in our environment has a lot of xenoestrogens, which are synthetic estrogens. They're found in plastics and in other sources. And that can really screw up a neuroendocrine system, especially for women, and create fertility challenges and difficulty getting pregnant. So we want to really get that neuroendocrine system balanced, manage stress levels and clean out the chemicals and toxins from the body.
Well said. How about stress reduction, exercise? Do you go through the stuff like that as well?
Oh yeah, it's full lifestyle. And that's the cool thing with working with a holistic chiropractor is we focus first on the chiropractic adjustment, right? Like we understand that this is the biggest gift that we have to give to a patient is to align their spine and any other joints in their body, but specifically the spinal joints, which are impacting the function of that person's nervous system. So by getting someone in alignment and adjusted, we know that their nervous system functions optimally, which really controls the entire system of the body. And that also impacts fertility. So I've had patients that literally just were getting chiropractic adjustments, and let's say they were already doing IVF, so we couldn't go in and do a whole detox with them. They kind of came to me a little bit later in the game, and we were looking just to get pregnant, and just getting them adjusted help to create a successful pregnancy.
Yes.
So, which is really cool, right?
Yeah.
So, but in addition to chiropractic adjustments, holistic chiropractors are looking at lifestyle, and that does include, in addition to the detox and diet that I already mentioned, it does certainly incorporate stress management tools. So in my office, I recommend doing meditation, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. For the average person who doesn't have an existing meditation practice, I recommend using an app, and there's a couple different great apps out there. I really love Infinite Abundance, which is from Deepak Chopra, but there's a few other ones out there too. And you can set the timer for however much time you have available for that day. It could be 5 minutes or it could be 30 minutes, and it could be adjustable. And, but scheduling that time at least 5 minutes every single day to just sit quiet and clear your mind, it's so hugely grounding and so hugely helpful just to turn off that overrunning conscious mind that's just like trying to multitask and get 5,000 things done at once, and it creates a lot of stress within the body. Exercise is also great for stress management, but it's also hugely important for the strength of the musculoskeletal system, right, as well as the cardiovascular system. So we want to make sure from a preconception perspective that the body is physically in a really good place prior to getting pregnant. And I do have women that continue with their workouts throughout pregnancy because they established a routine exercise regimen prior, so they're able to maintain pretty much that same level of intensity with their exercises all the way up through towards the end of the pregnancy. And only, maybe those last couple months, they start to back down the intensity level. But that's huge because birth is a musculoskeletal event, and we want everything aligned and strong, from the pelvic floor muscles to the alignment of the pelvis, which will impact the baby's position. And we just have a very narrow window for that baby to fit through the pelvis. So everything really needs to be in alignment to have an easier labor and delivery and a successful vaginal delivery.
I agree. So let's talk about that pelvic sacral alignment. There's going to be some women out there listening that are familiar with what's called a breech, where the baby's not lying head down. And that becomes very stressful because there's aggressive maneuvers they can do in the hospital, or you may have to end up getting scheduled for a C-section. But there's chiropractic ways created by Dr. Larry Webster, probably 30 years ago or more, where and you do this technique, I do this technique to help turn breech or in utero constrained babies. How about explaining that to our audience and what that's all about?
Definitely. So, I think it was like maybe in the 70s that Dr. Webster essentially created this technique. And it's funny because we don't, today's day and age, we don't call it the breech turning method,
Right.
but essentially that's what it does, right? So as chiropractors, whether you are pregnant or not, we're always concerned about the alignment of the pelvis and the sacrum, because that's the foundation of the spine. And if any of those joints are out of alignment when you're weight bearing, essentially anyone who is walking, we want to make sure that that pelvis is functioning normally and properly with the proper movements. And what we see specifically during pregnancy is with the relaxin hormone that's secreted in the body literally at conception, it starts to loosen the ligaments throughout the whole body, and that very much impacts the pelvis, because the pelvis is made up of two joints that are called sacroiliac joints. They're on each side of the tailbone, and those joints are only held together by ligaments. And so they're very much impacted by relaxin hormone. The joints can easily become hypermobile, meaning they're moving too easily, going out of alignment. That can certainly create a lot of back pain, or even sometimes radiating pain down a woman's leg. It's actually not sciatica. That's typically a misnomer. It's actually a referral from that joint because the joint is inflamed. So as chiropractors, we're really focused on getting those joints in alignment, relieving that pregnant woman's back pain, but also really wanting to support the alignment of her pelvis, because we know her pelvis will become the birth canal during birth. And certainly if it's like a basketball hoop, if it's a little bit skewed, that's going to close down the opening that the baby needs to come through, the bony pelvis. And we want that hole to be as wide as possible in order for that baby's head to easily pass through it. So that's important for the birth. But even prior to that, the uterus attaches to the front of the sacrum, which is the tailbone. And so if a woman's sacrum is out of alignment during pregnancy, once again, that can easily happen from the relaxin hormone, or just the additional weight of the belly creates new biomechanical stresses on her pelvic alignment. That can actually create what you were referring to earlier, that intrauterine constraint, meaning because the uterus attaches to the sacrum, it can pull that uterus into a more to one side or the other, and that can create a breech, which is either butt or foot down positioning of the baby, or transverse, meaning the baby is literally lying across the woman's abdomen. And neither of those positions are ideal for birth, and they typically at this point, 99% of them now are an automatic C-section scheduled. So we really, to support a woman who's wanting to have a natural vaginal delivery, which is the best option for birth if possible, we need to get that baby in a head down or vertex position. And one of the best ways to do that is with the Webster Technique, with a chiropractor who's been trained in properly addressing the alignment of that woman's sacrum and pelvis, and helping by just adjusting those joints of the pelvis, we're able to create space and allow the baby to turn head down on its own. It's safe. It's non-invasive. It doesn't require any sort of force on the woman's abdomen in comparison to the external version technique that you mentioned earlier, which is performed by an OB. You have to be at least 7 weeks pregnant, meaning full term. It's typically done in the hospital with an epidural because it is so forceful, and it can sometimes create a woman to go into labor. And so, and it's also very painful. So it's really ideal if your baby is not head down to certainly try the Webster Technique first with a Webster certified chiropractor. You can find those at the website, ICPA4kids.org. The International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, they list the chiropractors in your community that are Webster certified. And I also do in my office recommend acupuncture as well to help babies that are not head down.
Interesting. We have an acupuncturist in our office, and I never thought of that. That's interesting. Okay. I'll have to look into that as well. Mm-hmm. Great.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So let's, this is something I'm interested in, postpartum care for the mother chiropractically.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So any woman who's given birth knows, it's like running, a marathon plus, right? Depending on how many hours the labor was. It's very, very physically, mentally, intense, and it requires a lot of, stamina essentially to get through that process. And depending on that woman's pelvic alignment prior to the delivery, it can create some stress and strains to the alignment of that woman's pelvis afterwards. So I have had women in my office who literally the bone in front of the pelvis, the pubic symphysis, was completely separated and almost like sprained open from the delivery. It's very painful. It's very difficult to walk when your pelvis is in that type of position. And chiropractic can be hugely helpful in literally just getting your pelvis back into alignment, lined up, and it helps it heal much faster after having a vaginal delivery. And there's also patients in my office who ended up with an emergency C-section. However, if their body had already started the labor process and the pelvis had opened, even though they didn't actually have a vaginal delivery, they could still also have misalignments in their pelvis from labor. So just getting checked after delivery is really an important piece of helping a woman heal and recover faster after giving birth. And I also very much recommend getting the newborns checked as soon as possible after delivery as well. So we educate the women in our practice, please, you and the baby, ideally come in the first week after the birth for both of you to get checked. And it makes such a difference from a breastfeeding perspective, as well, latch is improved, mother's milk supply is improved, mother feels better, like just, she could have a lot of, even her neck, she might have pains in her neck, hips, who knows, it's not just the pelvis, any area of her body that might have been really used, tremendously during the birthing process, she can get relief from that, from a nervous system, musculoskeletal system perspective. And then, birth can be straining on the baby's alignment as well. Some births more than others. So it's just great to get the baby checked from a wellness checkup perspective. And, the sooner the better. We find, sometimes in my office, if the mother was not under care during her pregnancy, the baby might get referred in at 2, 3, 4 months old for, let's say, torticollis, where the baby has a head tilt. And that typically actually occurred during the birth process. So if I had checked that baby as a newborn, soon after birth, they would have never developed that head tilt, the flat spots on their head. We could have actually straightened them out and they would have grown and developed in a straight and aligned manner by getting checked earlier.
You just answered my next question, basically. So, which is fantastic, because, both of us have gotten this question 1,000 times. Why do newborns and children need chiropractic care, right? I mean, we've gotten that 100 times. But how about explaining to our audience how the care of a newborn or a young child is different than the typical adjustment that they see them getting or an adult gets? Because it's very different.
It's very different. So I feel like I explained why a baby would need to get checked. Certainly chiropractic is so much more than neck and back pain. So it's about function of nervous system. And because birth can be straining on a baby's alignment, and that could be certainly a C-section delivery can put a lot of stress on that baby's head and neck as the doctor is pulling the baby out. But a vaginal delivery can also put stress on a baby's alignment. And if there's forceps or vacuum extraction used during the birth, then we know that baby received a lot of stress on its alignment. Pitocin also puts a lot of stress on the baby's alignment during labor, because it can create up to 50 times stronger uterine contractions during the birth process, and that is stressful on the baby's alignment. So once the baby is born, either immediately they might have latching issues that will be quickly identified, and those babies get referred into my office obviously a lot sooner, because this is like a feeding issue, and if the mother is very committed to wanting to continue to breastfeed, she wants to get this issue addressed. Sometimes the babies get referred in later for colic, gas, reflux, torticollis, plagiocephaly, which is that flat spot on the head, constipation. These are some of the common things I see with newborns and infants in my practice. And the adjustment, as you were mentioning, is so much different for a baby, toddler, and younger children than it would be for a teenager or for an adult. It obviously is modified for the size of the patient. So when I'm adjusting, a 7-pound newborn, my touch is super gentle and light, and it essentially kind of looks more like I'm massaging the spine in certain segments or working on the head as well with the cranial alignment. And it's very light force, because of the size of the baby. And their ligaments are also super loose those first few years. So it's just, there's no audibles, there's no cracking or popping, and but it's the same purpose. It's aligning the spine, the cranium. If there's a TMJ issue or other plates of the skull that might be out of alignment, those can all be corrected through a chiropractic adjustment, but just in a very gentle way. So especially in my office, the newborns, they typically sleep through their adjustments, which shows how gentle they are. If there is a latching issue, I might have to go in the baby's mouth and do a little bit of work, and they don't always love that part, but it's about releasing any restriction with the tongue. And also I do a lot of work with babies after, like, post-frenectomy. If they needed to get a tongue tie release or a lip tie release, then getting that type of cranial adjusting really benefits that procedure as well. And then as children get older, the adjustment will obviously be modified for their size. So if they're 2-3 years old or whatnot, there might be a little bit of audibles, but it's still a much gentler adjustment. It does not hurt. And that's just the whole thing. Chiropractors that are trained in adjusting pediatrics, once again, you can find them on the ICPA website. We modify our adjustments for the size of the patient.
Well said, well said. Now, is there, it's funny, people ask me all the time, like if they're going somewhere, they're moving, or if they have a family member in another state, like, how do I find a chiropractor in another state? And if I don't have any direct referral, the first thing I tell them is find a chiropractor that sees kids.
Yeah.
If you find a chiropractor that sees kids, that, their intention is in the right direction, which is, maximizing the function of the nervous system, maximizing the health of the spine. And I don't know, I mean, I tell everybody that's my litmus test for finding a chiropractor where if you don't know who to look for or how to look for one.
Yeah, I agree with that. A family wellness chiropractor tends to, which is what the practice that we have here. So we do see men here, some dads come in, but the majority of our patients are pre-postnatal women and young children. Most of the children in our office are actually under the age of 5. And I think that's just part of the demographic of the community in Hoboken where I'm located. It seems like once the kids are school age, a lot of the families tend to move out to the suburbs. But they love living here when the babies are young because it's very stroller friendly. There's lots of areas to walk around this 1 square mile town with your stroller, and it's great for socialization for new moms to be able to connect and not feel so isolated. So that's what we see here. But yes, if a family is moving to another state, I just once again refer them to the ICPA website. And I feel really confident with the members that are listed there. They might have their Webster certification. They also might have their pediatric certification, like I do. And I do find that these doctors are principled. They really understand the vitality of chiropractic and the importance of checking someone's spine from birth till grave, right? Like cradle to grave, right. Essentially, that all of us that have a spine can benefit from chiropractic care.
Cool. Now, did we miss anything regarding the Brayton birth method?
I feel like we covered it well. The Brayton birth method is really coming from the philosophy that, an empowered woman is going to make educated decisions about who her birth provider is, where she chooses to birth, how she chooses to birth, and who is on her birth team supporting her throughout her preconception through postpartum journey. And it's just really recognizing that innate intelligence within the body to be able to grow and make a healthy baby and birth a healthy baby with minimal to no interventions. And that's something that I find is, sorely lacking, especially in the United States birth culture, where we see now 1 in 3 deliveries are surgical births. So I'm really passionate about, at least, especially starting with the United States, how can we really put the power back into the birthing mama's hands and have her not make decisions based on fear, because I see a lot of fear regarding pregnancy and birth. That's kind of part of the culture here. And part of that's coming from liability and, doctors and hospitals needing to protect themselves, right? But It does come from fear. And fear is really not the best place to make decisions. So that's what I'd like to bring an awareness to women, that you don't have to make choices based on fear. You make them based on science and facts. And that's, honestly, that is part of the beauty of the internet. I know there's some crazy stuff out there, but it really can give you a lot of information and education if you go to the right resources. And my podcast, Well Adjusted Mama, I feel like is a great resource for women to be able to learn more about this process, so that they are, once again, educated consumers making really educated choices about how they want to proceed through this really special period of their life.
That's great. And we talked earlier, you in the somewhat near future, you will have a book released on this entire topic, correct?
Yeah, definitely. The book I wrote in Bali, which was now, gosh, I can't believe it, 2.5 years ago. It was kind of the last piece of this book has not been written yet, and that's why it's waiting to be published. I'm now realizing the book was waiting on me to experience pregnancy and birth personally, which I'm excited to say. I am now I'm now in my first pregnancy. So I had a lot of wisdom going into this, but it's like certainly now I have the personal experience that will be, I think, an added dimension to my book. So I am hoping, ideally the end of the year or let's be not too aggressive, 2018, I think sounds good. A good time for the book to be released.
Well, when it's released, we're going to have you back on again for sure, without a doubt.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Any last words for us?
The last words I'd like to share, especially with the women listening to this podcast today, is to just really trust the power within you, trust your intuition, and listen to your gut, because I know it will always guide you to make the best choices. And that's not always coming from the brain. And sometimes it's just coming from that visceral heart, solar plexus connection. So, that's where a meditation practice can be highly valuable. If you're not feeling that you can trust your intuition, that means that you could benefit from more of a grounding type practice that just takes some of that distracting mind chatter out of the way and brings you back to your source. And that's where you will live in your power and make the best choices for you and your family. So that's what I'd like to share today.
Well said. Thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate it. My name is My pleasure. My name is Dr. Noah, your co-host, and you are listening to the Beyond Your Wildest Dreams podcast. If you like what you've heard today, please share this with your friends and encourage them to subscribe on iTunes. Leaving a review and a rating really, really helps people find us. It moves up the chart, so it's really, really crucial. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Laura. You're going to post once we release this podcast. You're going to release this on your podcast as well.
Yes, I would love to get this on Well Adjusted Mama as well.
Yeah, that'll be a great cross promotional for both of our podcasts. That'll be fantastic, and you can subscribe to our incredible weekly email at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome.